So we would love to welcome QSI to our show today. Thank you so much for being here. QSI is not only a business owner and CEO, which is quite a task on a daily basis, but he is also a lifetime learner and energy healer. And as he evolved in his spiritual journey, began to not only understand the cosmos and the cosmic energy around all of us, he also started feeling and seeing its impact, a kind of surrendering, if you will, to the higher power led to a time where people started seeking him out for advice and for healing. Kusai has spoken with many leaders in high organizations, and they seek his advice on a regular basis. And I would have to say that I am definitely one of those individuals. So thank you so much for being here today, Kusai.
Thank you. I'm excited to be.
Yeah, I love giving you a call when it's been a tough week or month and saying, I just need to get grounded. What am I supposed to do?
And we have good conversations then.
We have fantastic conversations. So I'd like to start off with a little bit of discussion around leadership, Kusai. With our conference coming up, the premise of it is leadership, but it's not just coming in and being motivational and let's inspire everybody for an hour or two and hope that they take it home. What we're really trying to do is impact the lives of everybody who attends in a way that we're giving them real content to take home and use in their personal growth so that they can use that to continue their growth because that's where it makes them the better leader, right? It's not just reading the book, it's putting the action plan in place. It's not just going to the session, it's taking the tools and using them. And so that's a really big portion of what we want to focus on. And in saying all that, can you explain to us the importance of the mind body connection in leadership?
Sure. Sure. It's really truly about getting aligned with your true self, right? So it's mind, body, but it's energy as well, right? As leaders, we are almost forced to take action. And when you think about take, you're already coming from a place of lacking, right? Where mindful leaders, where leaders that are aligned will usually give and they will share, right? So there they're coming from abundance, right? And that's why that I think mind, body, energy alignment is really important. When I think about leaders, I think about people that they have an ability to attract. They feel like they have a magnetic personality. They're assertive, right? And that they're connected, right? Because when we get out there in the morning, we come up as different people. We sometimes feel we're badgered or we're victimized or we want to avoid scenarios or we want to be controlling. But really, what we are trying to do is we're trying to be connected, magnetic, and assertive. That's what I think about from a traits and being aligned for leaders.
So, how do you find that alignment? Because, like you just said, it's you're getting up, and some days there's all kinds of emotions, and even throughout the day, not even just when we first get up, but depending on the situations or the scenarios that we're dealing with in just one given day, that mindset can shift. So, can you dive into that a little bit of how do you keep the energy flowing and the alignment when you're bouncing like almost like a ping pong ball all day long?
Sure, yeah, our days just get more and more hectic, right? So
Yeah.
it's interesting in ancient Greece, people would go to the oracle, right, to the temple of Apollo, and to kind of find out what destiny has in store for them or what action they should take. And on that temple, there are just two words. In Greek, it's Ganathi Savithon, which stands for know thyself. That's all it says. So, really, the first thing I advise leaders to think about is to really get to know themselves. It's very uncomfortable for a lot of people, but at the end of the day, you've got to be introspective, be kind, be self compassionate, and be able to know that you need to grow and not just judge other people, but first judge yourself, right? So, as I was talking about earlier, those three things you want to be from a practice perspective, I get up every morning and I will look at kind of those three things. Am I Am I feeling connected, or am I feeling, I'm going to be badgered? Or am I going to try to avoid this person today or this situation because I don't like this client or this vendor? Or am I going to really control this outcome because I want to make the sale? So all of these three things are typically how we end up coming to work. Instead of that, I consciously, intentionally change almost the polarity of what I'm thinking into being connected or into being magnetic or into being assertive, because assertive is authority, right? And that's the kind of practice you want. And mindfulness and meditation and those kind of things help you, because essentially you are removing the resistance and then allowing your true self. So you want to present yourself as your true self versus what a lot of times we come out as different people, really. So that's a practice I would suggest. Know thyself first.
Know thyself. Yeah. But how do you find that alignment? So you and I have spoken before a lot about meditation, and I know there's a lot of different practices out there, but can you dive into that a little bit? Because I think when we talk about alignment, some people will look at you and go, I don't even know. Like, how do I even figure that out?
Right. I think the easiest thing really is the first one is to meditate. I think people have this idea that meditation needs to be on some mountaintop, and the sages are doing that. Not really. You could meditate while you're eating. You could meditate while you're walking. You can meditate while you're listening to music. Everybody has a different way. And all you're trying to do is, well, the most common thing I get back is, well, they tell you to stop thinking. And I'm just trying to think to stop thinking. So that itself is a myth, because I don't think we possibly can stop thinking. What we try to do is we try to focus on something that's inconsequential. So if somebody is listening to a guided meditation, so they're just listening to that person and the music, and that's getting them into a meditative state, right? Or right before sleeping, if you're doing that, people will ask me and say, I just fell asleep. That's great, because you reached a meditative state right before you sleep. Perfect way to go to sleep, because you're going to wake up in mode. So yeah, being mindful is, so one is meditation. The other thing is to think about this as really an energy flow, because you must have heard what you give is what you get, right? So when you give love, you get love, and you give respect, you get respect. It's really a flow of energy. So it's not about getting tied down to one thing. It's about letting it flow. So being mindful to me is being present. It's being compassionate. It's being open to ideas. That's when things are going to flow into experience. And really, that's what I would suggest you do. So whether it's meditation or being mindful, I know mindfulness is used a lot nowadays, but it's really being about being present and letting things come to you.
So, how do you think that affects an individual's leadership style? Like how they show up to the table?
I think even if you take your example, Joe, right? Last year you had this idea about this conference, right? It was this pure energy. And then you got a whole movement to follow behind you, right? So that happened because the cosmos, right? I think we forget that there's a lot, it's a confluence of 1,000 factors that affect any. And so it's hard for people to understand that. They're like, we're used to doing stuff, and we do stuff, and then this happens. Got news for you. That's not really what's happening. You're influencing an outcome, but you're not controlling. So, as an example, let's say you had two CEOs that got board mandates to, I don't know, increase their sales by 20%. And one CEO will go out there, get his advisors, get the data, put it together, marketing, this, that, sales team, great. The other CEO will do the same thing, but will then add the mindfulness part of it, where he or she is going to be compassionate, talk to his team, be mindful, be open, be present. And then that alone will get more people and ideas to come into your experience, right? And so who do you think is going to reach that 20% mark first? The one that's trying to do all of this with themselves, with their physical side, or one that has some cosmos helping? And that's the big difference, and it's hard, right? You and I have been in this role. We are just doing, reacting, doing, boom. And it's sometimes just stepping, because when you come, so that's what I think needs to happen.
I would definitely agree with that. Do you see that So, follow-up question to that, do you see where sometimes that stepping back and letting go, sometimes you can do that in like a 5-minute span? And I feel like sometimes you can sit back and go, okay, I just need to breathe and be mindful and really try to think clearly about this, maybe meditate. And there are other times where you feel like, oh, I need another day or two to really sink into this situation, really be present and mindful, and maybe go through a couple of meditation sessions.
Sure.
What
Yeah, I
what do
think
you thought? Yeah.
it really depends, right? I think what we need to learn is to become more aware, right? I think all of these things that I've been talking about is, increasing your awareness. So if your inside, your inner being is saying, just wait for 5 minutes, wait for 5 minutes. But then if it's saying you need a lot more time to think about this, then wait a lot more. And it's just, I think we tend to look at external factors and try to solve an internal problem. And really, that's where we fail. And know thyself, know and trust that the universe is going to work. As they say, when your belief is true and intentional, the cosmos will conspire, and it does. And that's what I would suggest.
You're really good at, and I'd like to get into this in a minute, but just to lead the direction in this, you're really good about reading people's energy. We've had a lot of those interactions where I'll walk into a room or you'll walk into a room and immediately you can tell how I'm feeling, what my stress level is, and where I am, like how my aura is. So before we touch into that, because to me that's extremely interesting, and I think it's a big piece of why you and I have connected so quickly and so well throughout our friendship the last several years, is when someone is at a very heightened sense of stress. Because let's face it, you're a business owner, you've been through ups and downs. We all sit in those buckets at various times, but we all sit there. When you're in a really high sense of stress, I feel like it's hard to be mindful, to take the step back because the stress is so high. And all you're thinking about is that solution. So, what would you say to somebody in if you were to walk into that room, be able to see that energy and feel that they're at a very high stress level, what would you say to them? What would the advice be?
Right. I mean, the advice always is to move to a different thing, right? It's that classic state where we are in a very negative situation. And it's, like you said, it's almost impossible to switch to a very positive, ecstatic kind of mode. So, what I try to do at that for people is to really move them from a very specific bad to a more general bad, to a more general good, to a very specific good. And that moves your vibration. So, as an example, if let's just say you've been talking about several deaths that you've seen with your colleagues and stuff like that, and a very traumatic thing. But when you start talking to them and saying, if anybody who had faced death in the family, would they feel traumatized or feel, and then you move to a thing saying, well, what people that have celebrated the lives of people, their elders and stuff like that, how do they generally feel good? And then you focus down to somebody who's passed in 5, 10 years ago that you learned from and you really cherish, although they've passed. And suddenly you say, yeah, I really feel good about that and all the stuff that she did. Now your vibration has changed, your face has changed, your aura has changed, and everything is really dependent on that. It's all about, there've been tons of books written about it, and law of attraction, things like that. But it's about the fact that energy keeps moving. And when we focus and get too focused on one thing, we are getting the negative energy. That's not what we want. We want to keep it positive. And if where you are is not positive, then move on to something that's positive. Because that's the only way energy flows. Because if you get tied down to one, you're getting addicted. That's not good. That's the negative energy that you're working with. So that's what I would typically do.
And I feel like when you're in that negative state and you're staying in that negative state,
Right.
Again, going back to being mindful and self-aware, you can't show up for anybody else in a positive fashion, right? Because you're just taking your stress, your anxiety, it's doubling or tripling, and then it's being passed on to other people that you're interacting with.
Correct. Correct. In fact, people like when you go to somebody who has just lost somebody are all are usually in approaches to sympathize and almost get to them and start mourning with them. Then you're doing yourself and the person a disservice. If you stay at a higher vibration, they're going to come up to yours versus you going down and adding to theirs. And people don't understand that. They think you're not being sympathetic. No, I'm doing good for that person too. And so it's just a little bit of counterintuitive thinking, maybe. That's what helps.
Yeah. So talk to us about vibrations. I find this fascinating and
Yeah.
oral. And maybe I'm saying that incorrectly, but going back to you being able to read individuals' aura, can you talk to us about that and what that means and where it comes from?
Yeah. So I think it's that feeling that a belief system that we are vibrational beings first and then physical beings. So I think science has proved it. There are these special cameras that have seen plant life and have seen the kind of outline of a leaf before the leaf actually was came about. So I think our energies precede kind of things that are happening. And so that's why vibrations are evident. So even if you were telling me that, oh, I'm feeling great and stuff, and which you're not really feeling great, your vibration is saying how you really are feeling. And people who can see auras can see that. And that's why we are so forced to, like, we go into a business meeting and we are highly traumatized. Or what do we say? We're fine. How are you right? I'm fine. Doesn't look fine to me. But yeah, so that's why the vibrations are, but also you're pretty good at this about body language and nonverbal cues. So our body is already reacting, whether we're looking up, left, different things with our eyes. And so the vibration's already causing all that, but we're speaking, trying to overcome that. And again, going back to that first thing I was talking about, connected, being assertive, connected, and magnetic, we are going back to the other side where we were trying to over control or avoid, feel victimized, things like that. So that's where it all comes from.
Yeah, it's such good stuff. I know I've definitely done that with you where I've walked in the room and you say, Joe, how are you doing? And I just look at you and go, I'm fine. It's great. And you just look at me and start laughing and go, okay, I know that's not accurate. I find it so fantastic because really and truly, when you're going through the day and this, when as a business owner and a leader, there are a lot of responsibilities on your plate. So from going from one moment to the next, whether it's this meeting to another meeting, to an online meeting, to a phone call, you're handling different situations that have different dynamics, different elements, and different intensity. And so you are trying so hard to be able to match and be in that space that you need to be in. Right. So right now we're enjoying this podcast, but then I could have a call after this where I know it's going to be a not so easy or comfortable conversation, but it has to be had. Right. So part of me is probably premeditating that and then going into that conversation, being able to match the energy that I think I'm probably going to have. We all go through that, right? All of us as a leader, business owners, we're all going through that. So I find it fascinating how you do all of this of really trying to align yourself so that you can be as present as possible with the varying situations throughout the day.
And that's good news, right? Because you don't need to worry about all the different people because they have their own journeys and their own lives. And as long as you're truly aligned with yourself, you are going to show up perfect and you're going to show up and the way you need to. And then the other folks are going to come into your experience. So the other example you were giving, oh, I know the next meeting is something I really don't like, and this is how I'm expecting. If you're thinking that's what you're going to get, And so instead of that, if you're just aligned and say, I'm going to come up as my best self, I'm going to come up as magnetic, I'm going to come up as connected, and I'm going to go in there that way, assertive, and that's it. And the other person, Cosmos will not allow it any other way because they're going to have to succumb to it because that's the only experience you're going to get.
I agree. And in a previous podcast, we talked about preparation. So, like discipline, preparation. I think that if you can have the self alignment and you can have the mindset that I know I am showing up authentically and I have done my homework and I authentically can come to the table with my information and where I sit, it really is difficult for the other person who maybe probably or most likely is coming to the table almost adversarial
Yeah.
to compete with your energy at that point because you're so calm and centered. They have a very hard time managing around that because it's not what they expect. So we actually do ourselves a favor by being aligned and being in that mindset and being centered when we're going into a situation like that. Is that pretty
Oh,
accurate?
absolutely. Absolutely. I think the more you go in with the attitude that things are going to be all right, that you have done everything that in your power that you could do, then you got to have faith. It's about trusting the universe that the rest of it will take care of itself. And if the journey is that you're not going to get the job, or even that is okay, because in the long run, maybe that was the right thing for you. So that trust has to be there. We get too focused in trying to control outcomes, right? And I think that was my biggest learning to come to that conclusion. You can talk about that if you want to.
Yeah, that was actually gonna be my next question is there a situation or a learning lesson that you've had where this all really came around for you?
Yeah, no, it was. And I had many epiphanies, but this was probably the most powerful. It was, I think, about 10, 12 years ago. And it was in a meditation retreat. And we had been meditating all morning. And after lunch, I was just taking a walk. And I sat on the bench. And I must have been there maybe 5 or 7 minutes. But this is what went through. And those 5 or 7 minutes, I actually saw my entire life being played. Usually, people who die say that, had near death experiences. I'm seeing myself being born, going to school, college, moving countries, graduating, starting all these ventures. And all of this is happening. But at the same time, if you can imagine this, I can see 1,000 other things happening around me that are causing these for me to graduate from school even and coming over getting to the US somehow to do my bachelor's and my master's and all that stuff. And I don't even know how one could picturize something, but all these other things are happening. And when I came out of it, I'm realizing I'm like, oh, I'm never going to say I became the CEO. I did this, I did, because there were 1,000 other things that were causing it to happen. And it was just the most humbling experience I've had because it was clear to me that I do not control outcomes. It is truly a confluence of 1,000 factors. The fact that we are here today talking is because of multitude of things. That we became friends as a multitude. Everything that happens to us, we influence it, of course. Because I don't want people to say, oh, they just sit on the ground and do nothing. Things are just going to happen. No, that is free will, of course. But it's almost like saying, have you ever planned something like to the last detail and has it ever happened?
Yeah.
Right. And so it doesn't matter how detailed you're planning. And so I don't know, we should recognize that we don't control outcomes. Bottom line was that my life became a whole lot easier because I'm going to try my best. I'm going to influence as much as I can, but then it's going to be a lot of different things that are making things happen already, and the outcomes will come as they will. So you don't get, the other thing it's also helped is you don't get really upset about things not exactly happening like you, because what you visualize is quite different from what actually happened.
I hear sometimes people say you should never have a plan B. But I think that comes out of context. So back to what you're talking about. You work hard, you plan, you have a specific outcome that you want, but you really do need to have a B, C, and D really for your mental comfort, in my opinion, because just like you said, you can never plan anything out to the T, right? You can have this expectation that you want, and you can have this outcome that you desire, but it's not just up to you. It's also up to so many other dynamics that are
Right.
impacting, right?
No, that's right. You're agreeing to that fact, and in that you're planning out 2 or 3 different scenarios. Nothing wrong with it because for me, it's a plan for the worst and hope for the best, right? And
Yeah.
so those are all good techniques. But even plan B and plan C and even plan D sometimes will not go exactly as you expected it to, which is okay. That's the part about not getting tied. This is the other thing about addiction. We get addicted to our outcome. Might be.
Yeah, you're so right. I was speaking with Rick Macy, and a big thing that we were talking about was, mental strength, right? And I think so much of what you so much of what you teach and you practice and we're talking about today ties in so well with that mental state. Because if you don't have the alignment and you're not centered, you cannot be in a mental state to walk in and be ready for the various situations. Because, like you just said, you can plan and plan, and you can do your best, and you can work as hard as you want, but it's not going to go exactly how you wanted. And mentally, you need to be ready for that. And
Mhm.
physically, emotionally, and spiritually, you should be grounded and centered enough to understand that at the same time.
Correct, correct. And as a trainer, I'm sure he's telling his students that it's not about if they go in there just try to win, they probably won't do as well as about just playing well. I think it's that just the way you control your mind sometimes and what you're trying to get too focused on a winning outcome, you're not going to play well.
Yeah.
But if you get focused on just playing the best you can, you might just win.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. So, what advice would you give leaders? And let me caveat this a little bit. We talk a lot about leaders and managers, and there's a difference. A leader doesn't have to be a specific title. It can be anybody within an organization can be a leader. It's like a sports organization. You have the owner, you have the GM, you've got the coach, and you've got the player. Everybody there is a leader, and they're in different capacities. So this is not just about the executive or the C level or the upper management. But what advice would you give leaders, individuals who are striving for more and trying to help others be more? They're looking to start aligning their mind and body.
So it's really the mind shift between thinking about external factors, about whether it's reading books or coaching, all that is good. Think about it more internally, is be more mindful. Think about, like I said, know thyself. And because the more time you spend about your being, right, really cultivating your being, is when your doing is going to become more important. So for leaders at every level, whether you're a mid-level manager or an athlete or just a worker bee, like you said, we are all leaders in our own way. But if you really truly think about your being and just being present, being there, being mindful, all that you do becomes more. And mindful people, mindful leaders always know that we're a work in progress. So think about yourself as a work in progress all the time. Be humble enough to recognize there's a lot to learn, that we're always growing. Be okay to just introspect. Where am I today? Can I shift? Can I go from not feeling connected, victimized to being connected. Similarly, just see if you can move your energy, and we are capable of doing that. And if you can start doing that on a regular basis, life will just become a whole lot smoother. You'll be in the flow a lot. That's what my advice is.
That's great advice. I think we all as humans and leaders need to keep that in mind more often. That's fantastic advice. I appreciate that. I do have a question for you in regards to the conference. So when you mentioned it earlier, we had this idea. To me, it was a calling. Really, just we're touching so many executives and leaders at every level as a recruiting firm. And there are a lot of conversations that I've had behind many a closed door, and just hearing all of the dynamics and the different things that everybody is dealing with. The list could just go on. But really understanding that we can't just go out and motivate. We can't just go out and scream from the rooftops and get you excited for an hour. We've got to do more than that. So that's really where that coaching piece from my background came in, to say, how can we coach and guide and give tools to be the better coach or leader? And I remember you were one of the first people I came to about this concept. So you heard about it from basically inception. It
Well,
and I
the idea came to you because you had this kind of energy feeling that you wanted to have, you wanted to share, you wanted to give. And that's, you created the energy, and then you got the idea flowing into you saying, maybe I should do a conference. That way I can share. And that's how it all transpired. So I
I
think
would
the takeaways at the conference, and you're right, because I go to a whole lot of conferences and you come back home and within hours you're to your whole life. You've forgotten all the motivational speeches and all those phrases, and you've taken pictures of the screenshots and you never see them again. So I think what would be interesting to think about is that after every day we talk about key takeaways and something that you can really take and act on when you go home, whether it's being mindful or what can you do, or these exercises that you could do, or being leaders in some other ways about mental strength, or all the other speakers, the great speakers, and they all have their own, wisdom to share. How can we make it easy, bite size it, so that people will actually use it later? I think that's what you should think about.
Yeah, definitely. And I really appreciate you, QSI, for all the guidance you've given to me as a friend and a fellow business owner from so many different aspects, right? You really understand where I'm coming from and what we're trying to do and how we're trying to build this community. And we really just appreciate you being a part of it. You've been very impactful.
You're a great source of inspiration as well. And if I'm low energy, I think about you. Yeah. I just need to get Jill's power, whatever she's drinking in the morning.
A lot of coffee. That's it.
Okay. We'll switch to your brand of coffee then.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. So true. So I do have one final question for you, Kusai. At the end of the day, what do you want to leave for others? And I don't mean just your family. What is the impact, whether it's this conference, whether it's day to day? What do you want to give out into the universe?
I think legacy I would really like to leave is that whoever I've touched in my life, that I have helped them be happier. Because, when you're happy, don't only affect your family, you affect your community, you affect the world at large. And so I really hope that whether it's the law of attraction or the meditation that I teach or any of those things help people get happier. Alone, I think would be great for the universe as a whole. So that would be my hope.
I love that. You definitely do that. You definitely do that. As you think of me when you need inspiration, I think of you in the same way. hence my phone call to you 2 weeks ago.
Absolutely,
Well,
anytime. That's what I enjoy doing. And I think it's energy. Again, it's a two-way process. I may be the healer, but I'm actually getting healed as well. So it's really a two-way process. I appreciate
what
you
you
as
put out is what you get back, right? You just said
everything.
it.
This
Yeah.
law of reciprocation. The more you give and share, the more you're just going to receive.
I appreciate you very much. And thank you for your time today, Kusai. You're an incredible human, and we appreciate you.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely chatting.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.